And then the cherry on top, getting owned by the reporter Tuesday morning when he says, tries to make the joke saying, oh, you're late, that'll be $10 as a fine or whatever. And she says, well, maybe if you win a game, I'll show up on time.
I will say, I'm not a respect the biz guy, but respect the biz. I mean, that's like a 15-year-old comeback. Like, maybe if you won, I would show it. Like, you got a blue check. Come on.
Hey guys, welcome into the MKF College Football Show Week 2 edition. I'm Dan Watkins alongside the great John McKechnie of Rotowire.com. John, what's up, buddy? How you feeling after week 1 and a wonderful Labor Day weekend of college football?
Wasn't that the best? We got 5 full days of college football. Like, Thursday night was insane. Loved the backyard brawl. I thought that totally lived up to the hype. Friday night, you get the weird kind of interesting games. You get that TCU Colorado game with the lightning delay. Everything's going nuts. That horrible call in the Indiana Illinois game. So a lot of it's good to see that the fans are already in mid-season form as far as hating the refs, and good to see that the refs are at mid-season form as far as blowing obvious calls. And then Saturday just absolutely delivered as we expected. I thought Florida State LSU on Sunday night was a lot of fun. Brian Kelly, the nation unites around making fun of Brian Kelly. So that was like a nice moment. And then Monday, I feel like the nation also unites around making fun of DJU, and we got to do that. So that was, I think no complaints. I thought the week 1 was exactly what we could have hoped for, and maybe even a little bit more.
Absolutely. It was fantastic. And, I'm just going to come out and say it. For about 5 minutes Saturday night, the Irish, I bought the cheese. I took the cheese. I thought for a second, John, I Googled, I could show you my Google history, like the biggest Notre Dame wins in the last 30 years. Like the thought just comes into my mind. They're up 10-7. Like, the defense is holding. Smith and Jigba goes out of the game. CJ Stroud does not look that good in that game. They're like kind of holding the ball enough where it's like, okay, maybe they're actually going to pull this off. And I Googled and looked, like, I was literally like thinking to myself, this could be the biggest Notre Dame win of my lifetime. Like, that was how sad it's been as a Notre Dame fan since the early 90s for me.
So that was Schrodinger's Google search in that case, because once you click enter, then Notre Dame loses.
Yeah. Once the thought is seeped in my brain, it goes the wrong way. But anyways, I will say this though. I think Marcus Freeman becoming the head coach at Notre Dame is the best thing that could have happened to that program. I think those guys, they buy in and they're going to play for him. And I'm going to say it, John, Notre Dame's going to win playoff games, plural, with Marcus Freeman as the head coach going down the road here. And he's going to get a little bit of help as the playoff expands too.
Yeah, mark it down. I totally buy that as well. They're going to be a tough out the rest of the season. This to me was the only truly obvious loss on their schedule. We'll see what USC turns into and everything like that. But I mean, from here on, starting this weekend against Marshall, things are definitely looking up. But even though it's an L in the win-loss column for the actual season, holding tight against Ohio State the way that the Irish did for most of that game. That long drive was kind of the backbreaker, of course, but I think you have to be encouraged despite the loss if you're a Notre Dame fan like yourself.
I hate being the moral victory guy, but I'm going to take the moral victory in this one as they move on here. All right, anyways, let's move on. Last week, before week 1, we did 10 questions to start ahead of the entire college football season. You can check that out on our YouTube page at Monkey Knife Fight. Those will still hold for a couple weeks anyways until or you can just go back and laugh at us, in like a month from now. when we look at how wrong we were in some of those picks. But I thought we would start off and in the theme of our friend Furious George and do 5 furious questions heading into week 2. So I want to get your biggest winner from week 1. That could be a team, a player, a coach, anything. Who you got?
I think you got to start with Florida getting the statement win. Billy Napier's first game, obviously going to be a challenge going up against the Utah team that I liked to make the playoff. Now that doesn't look so good already. Oops. But I think Florida, has kind of reestablished itself. If Anthony Richardson continues to be, the type of player that he showed to be early last season, then of course last weekend, then I think that things are trending absolutely in the right direction for him. Going a little bit off the board, You gotta love the Arizona story. I think like the Jed Fish. They were horrible last year. They were terrible those late Sumlin years. To go into San Diego State, they're opening a new stadium for the Aztecs. They're Arizona, like it's touchdown underdog to win convincingly, and to allow 0 points in the fourth quarter when San Diego State's in catch up mode. That says a lot about what where Arizona might be heading to where they claw their way back to being a respectable program. It's been a hot minute since the Cats have been viewed that way, but hey, crazier things have happened. They're starting to put it together. I'm starting to see the theory behind it. And then otherwise, other winners, I thought anyone who was watching the noon window, especially ACC games, the East Carolina NC State game, bonkers, and then somehow it was even crazier in Boone between App State and UNC. That was just, 40 points from App State alone in the fourth quarter. You got to be kidding me.
Yeah, a lot of fun stuff this past weekend. John, your biggest loser from week one?
Maybe this is, recency bias or the fact that this was a standalone game, but LSU, the Brian Kelly era, I think, the LSU beat writers have done a good job kind of spin zoning this to where, Ed Ogeron didn't necessarily leave the cupboard super full. I think you could draw a comparison to the way that Jimbo left Florida State a little bit, but still to lose to an FSU team that I think is still working its way back on national TV in the state of Louisiana, no less. Tough, and then you get all the drama afterward, where Kayshon Boutte erases all the LSU mentions in his social media profiles. It's just a bit of a tough scene as far as LSU goes, and I think the realistic perspective, they were only supposed to be a 7-8 win team this year, but still, I think that most people were counting that as a win, so that's tough for them. Syracuse Louisville no showing against Syracuse was really surprising to me. That's a little bit further off the board, but I think it's significant nonetheless. I think a lot of people were excited about Malik Cunningham, and there was just nothing doing as far as Louisville is concerned. They've been building a lot of momentum on the recruiting trail. If Satterfield gets canned because of the way that the season is trending, that recruiting class could go away, and then things get really, really tough. And then Iowa scoring 3 points on offense against South Dakota State. They scored more points on defense than they did on offense. They forced 2 safeties in the second half to quote unquote pull away from the Jackrabbits in that one. So Iowa, stinky.
Best sign of the weekend, though, was the Iowa fan. I'm here for the punter.
that guy understands the assignment.
Yep. That was Iowa football in a nutshell. Yeah, biggest loser. It's Brian Kelly, man. I mean, that had all the makings of your classic, stereotypical Brian Kelly national spotlight game. You lose to a team that's just not that good. You look completely outmanned, outclassed. Your team kind of no-showed. The Kayshon Boutte thing, as you mentioned, he might not even want to play football for LSU anymore now. A little domino effect of that loss. And then just the fantastic ending to that game where it's like, okay, here they come. They're going to sneak this one out. He's going to be 1-0. And then it gets blocked out at the end. John, I was literally rolling on the floor laughing at this one as that game ended. It was fantastic. And then the cherry on top, getting owned by the reporter Tuesday morning when he says, tries to make the joke saying, oh, you're late. That'll be $10 as a fine or whatever. And she says, well, maybe if you win a game, I'll show up on time.
I will say, I'm not a respect the biz guy, but respect the biz. I mean, that's like a 15-year-old comeback. Like maybe if you won, I would show it. Like, you got a blue check. Come on.
I don't know. Maybe with any other coach, John, I might agree with you. But with Brian Kelly, the way he's carried himself, nope, sorry. Win a game, I'll show up on time. And they did have an exchange afterward. He laughed about it, so I guess they're all good there in Baton Rouge. Question 3, scale of 1 to 10, how seriously should we take Florida?
Well, this weekend is a big litmus test for it, but I think you got to be teetering on like a 7.5 to 8. I think that when in college football, if you truly have the most dominant player on the field, you have a really good chance of winning at least most of your games. And I think that's what we have in Anthony Richardson. I don't think the rest of that roster is overly impressive. I don't think that we're going to see like a ton of guys get drafted off this team. But, when you have Richardson just with that sheer dual threat ability, that ability to just run over defenders and also, throw that deep ball, connect on it, they're going to be, really tough to deal with, I think, the rest of the way. So I think that, we could see a 10-win season here from Florida. But, again, this weekend, they get it at home. So that's a big factor going up against Kentucky. And they've largely owned that rivalry, maybe not as much of late, but still, I think you definitely have to take Florida seriously. You beat Utah, I take you seriously.
Yep, and we'll get into that matchup in just a little bit. But first question 4, will DJU make it through the season as the starting quarterback in Clemson?
No chance. This was a nightmare scenario for Dabo Swinney. I think for him to kind of double down throughout the offseason and say DJ's our guy, even after struggling in spring. You point to him, trimming down a little bit, being more focused. The offensive performance on Monday night, especially in the first half, was pitiful. They couldn't get out of their own way against a terrible Georgia Tech team. So I think that, that really puts the pressure on Dabo, who's, had questionable quarterback personnel decisions in the past, dating back to Cole Stout over Deshaun Watson. And then, he handled it better with Trevor Lawrence and Kelly Bryant. And I think Kelly Bryant deserved a little bit more of a leash, having taken them to the playoff the year before. But, Klubnik coming in at the end too and looking impressive, it was late in the game and everything. But I think that this is Klubnik's team. It's just a matter of, does Dabo pull the plug before or after Clemson is handed its first loss?
Yeah, that it does kind of feel like the Kelly Bryant, Trevor Lawrence situation all over again, right? That we're just kind of waiting now at this point. Clemson's schedule, not particularly all that tough, but I don't think DJU's making it through. I don't think he's going to get through October as the starting quarterback. So moving on here, last question for you, John. Your thoughts on the 12-team playoff? It appears it's coming. Whether it's in 2026 or we get it sooner is yet to be seen. But what do you think about the 12-team playoff?
For someone who follows college football as closely as I do, I don't have super enlightened opinions on expansion. I think that it's a good thing that more teams feel like they have a chance at competing for something that's meaningful. And I think that, we've seen what used to be good but not great non-New Year's Six bowl games, really get cheapened over the last couple of years, because if they're not a playoff game, then the good players are opting out almost unilaterally. So there is that. And I do love the idea of, having lived in Wisconsin for a while, I want to see Miami go up to Madison late in the calendar year and try to pull off a victory with something serious on the line. So I love the idea of on-campus playoff games. I think that's my favorite part about it. Otherwise, I'm a little bit milquetoast as far as other reasonable takes are concerned when it comes to expansion.
It's more meaningful football. What's not to like? I think anybody that's kind of like throwing a fit about this on the internet has like a big dirty diaper or something like that. I don't know why you would have a problem with more meaningful football. I love the idea of on-campus games. I hope they do that for the quarterfinals as well. My only issue that I've seen so far with this is that the 6 conference winners, or what is it, the Power 5 and then the group of 1 or whatever, are going to get the top 6 seeds no matter what. I think that's a terrible idea, because most likely, and as we saw last year, the second best team in the SEC is probably going to be the second or third best team in the country, and they should be in that top 4. But that still needs to be ironed out, and they'll get there here as we move forward. All right, moving on. Week 2, let's get into these games. I think it's a sneaky good slate this week, John. It's full of some very interesting quarterback battles, and we'll start off with the big noon kickoff. It's Alabama at Texas. These two teams meeting for the first time since the 2010 National Championship game. That's also known as the Colt McCoy pinched nerve game, for those of you that remember watching that. The spread here, John, Bama's heavy favorites. I think it's up to 20.5. Any reason to think that Texas is going to keep this close Saturday? And I will give you this little stat here. They're 5-0 against the spread in their last 5 games as double-digit underdogs.
That's certainly interesting. That bears some significance to how they've done against the number. But you also mentioned that none of those games were against Alabama, were they?
No,
so when it comes down to it, Alabama, there's not a whole lot you can take away from their week 1 performance against Utah State, other than, they just checked the box. They dominated throughout thoroughly right away and all 4 quarters. And I just think that they're ready to roll once again. They're going into Austin. I know it's a hostile environment. I know it's going to be, like a zillion degrees on the field and everything. So that could, make things a little bit sticky, a little tricky, but Man, this Bama team I think is better than it was a year ago, and that's pretty scary to say because they are a team that rinsed the eventual national champions back in December in the SEC championship game. Bryce Young looks super sharp. Jermaine Burton a couple of touchdowns in his debut. They've got just such a deep, loaded group of receivers. We haven't even seen Jahmyr Gibbs get fully on track yet. Will Anderson didn't have a sack last week. I think that's coming this week. So I'm all over Alabama covering that spread. I know it's a comically large one between two kind of blue bloods, but I think that it's well reasoned. I think that Alabama should be favored by that much. I think they win by more than 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, and I think this game being at noon is further proof that Texas is indeed not back. So let's move on and let's talk about some of the players here. Bryce Young, 320.5 more or less is his total on MKF. He finished with 195 last week in that blowout win against Utah State, so didn't really see the end of that game. And then he reached 321 or more yards in 7 of 15 games last year. John, does he do it on Saturday?
I think that he does. I think that this would have to be, or I'd be more likely to say that Bryce Young throws for 400 yards in this one than he throws for fewer than 320. I think that Alabama's going to turn him loose in this particular matchup. They're going to hit some bigger plays. Maybe the defense doesn't set them up with short fields the way that it happened last week. So I think that there's just simply a lot more yardage potential to be had when it comes to Young. I imagine that he's going to be out there at least until the fourth quarter, well into it. So I think that there's just going to be enough pass attempts there and enough big plays based off of those to where I really think that Bryce Young lights it up on Saturday.
Love the more there as well. Moving on, Quinn Ewers, 235.5 passing yards, reached 225 last week against UL Monroe. But as you mentioned, Will Anderson is hungry for his first sack of the year. And a quote from him this week, I try to approach every quarterback the same, but for a young quarterback like that, it's going to be fun. So I think Ewers is going to be running for his life on Saturday. How about you?
Yes, I do as well. I could see this being one of those like cataclysmic games where the quarterback gets sacked 7, 8, 9 times. I really think that Texas is that overmatched and young on the offensive line. And that's just such a big problem when you have Will Anderson and Dallas Turner and all these other guys up front coming at you. I think that Texas needs to try to possess the ball. They need to get some first downs, sustain some drives with Bijan Robinson. And I think that, whenever the time comes to where Texas needs to abandon the run, I think that's just going to force or Alabama's defense is just going to pin its ears back. And this is going to be a game that makes people question why Quinn Ewers was like the top rated recruit of all time. I think it's going to be that bad for him. So I'm taking the less.
All right, let's talk about the running backs. Jahmyr Gibbs, 95.5 is his rushing total on MKF. Reached 93 yards last week on just 9 carries. Texas run defense did have a good outing against UL Monroe, holding them to just 2.2 yards per carry on 41 attempts. Can they do anything near that against Alabama?
I'm going to go with yes. I think that I'm more attuned to go with the less here for Jahmyr Gibbs. Maybe Alabama mixes in a little bit more Jace McClellan, Roydell Williams. Jahmyr Gibbs, I think he probably tops 95 yards from scrimmage, but rushing yards specifically, I'm taking the less.
All right. And then you got Bijan Robinson, as you mentioned, John. You think he's got to get involved big time here to start this game if Texas has any shot. His rushing total, 70.5. He reached 71. So he just barely got more than that last week on only 10 carries, though, in that blowout win. Looking back to last year, 4 games against ranked opponents for Bijan. He went over the century mark in 3 of them. Do you think he's going to get anywhere near that 70.5 in this one?
I think he is. I think, again, he's the key to Texas keeping this one even reasonably competitive. I think he's just such an absurd talent too. I think that he's the best running back prospect that we've had in college football in quite some time. Like even dating back past Jonathan Taylor, I think he's just special. Both as a runner and as a pass catcher. Obviously, we're concerned with the rush yards here. I think that we're going to see him, get 18, 20 carries. And for as good as Alabama's defense is and as shaky as I think Texas's O-line is, Bijan can kind of overcome that, get a couple chunk carries in there and take the more.
I'll throw his fantasy prop at you as well. 16.5. It's kind of low.
It is kind of low. I think that's too low for me. I think he finds the end zone. I think that we see him, pushing for 90 plus total yards from scrimmage. And I think that I'm comfortable with the more, even with Alabama kind of crushing Texas otherwise.
I like that as well. All right, moving on. Kentucky at Florida. It's a 7 p.m. kickoff. Anthony Richardson set the world on fire last week, and the MKF numbers are reflecting that. We got a couple for you, John. He's got 220.5 passing yards as his prop and 28.5 fantasy points as his prop here on MKF after he ran the ball in 3 times last week against Utah. I'm all aboard the Richardson train, John, but his career high in passing yards is just 168, and he did that last week. MKF line here is at 220.5. How do you feel?
So I have him projected for like 220.88. So like
Ooh.
that just is really, really tough to pick a side on. That's such a thin margin. So I'm more likely to chase the fantasy points. That I feel more confident in. I feel like Richardson has a really big day in this one. Accounts for multiple touchdowns, gets enough yardage from or on the rush or on the ground for him to hit the more as far as the rush or fantasy points is concerned. If I had to take a side, really good point on his previous career high passing yards, but I think that he would get the more in this case. I think that he's going to have to throw a little bit more, and I think that he ends up crossing the threshold for that number. But if I'm playing this slate, I'm more likely to take his fantasy points more.
All right. On the other side, you got Will Levis, 225.5 passing yards is his more or less. The Mayo in his coffee drinker put up 303 yards through the air last week against Miami of Ohio. 226 or more in just 5 of 12 games last season. And that includes a season low of 87 yards against Florida last year. UF also held Cam Rising to 216 last week. I think Rising's better than Levis. So what do you make of this?
Yeah, this is a tricky one. I'm going to go with the less here. This is on the road. I think that he might have to kind of help supplement the Kentucky ground game because it doesn't look like Chris Rodriguez is going to be available for this one. So I think that's a big concern for Kentucky just in general in this game. But I think it also kind of steers this Kentucky offense to maybe being likely to deploy Levis as a rusher because he does have that good athletic ability. Maybe it is fueled by the Mayo coffee, or maybe it's just the banana peels that he also eats. A strange guy. But I'm going with the less on this one. Less for Levis.
And I also want to get your thoughts on this gambling on the betting line here. Our friends at Bally Bet have it set at Florida minus 4.5. But Florida is 0-4 against the spread against Kentucky as of late. How do you feel about that line?
4.5. It's a bit too much for me to go all in on Florida, even though I've been kind of saying everything with my analysis today with like blue and orange glasses. I think Kentucky keeps it to like a field goal.
All right, very good. Moving on, another fun one in the SEC this weekend. South Carolina taking on Arkansas. Spencer Rattler and KJ Jefferson, John, both of their totals are set at 230.5. What do you think here for these guys?
Disaster day incoming for Spencer Rattler. I'll go ahead and buy the negative momentum that he put on film last week against Georgia State, where South Carolina needed a bunch of other stuff to happen in order to avoid the really tough soul cleaving upset loss to those Panthers, who are located not too far from me here in Atlanta. Rattler, this is going to go really poorly for him. And to be fair, Arkansas gave up a lot of chunk plays last week, but Cincinnati obviously did as well. So I think that Jefferson does well. I think that he goes for the more than 230, but I think that Rattler's in for a long day. It would shock me if he got benched, but it wouldn't shock me if he played poorly enough to get benched.
All right, fair enough. And then the nightcap, a very fun one out in Provo. Baylor at BYU. Any players you're going to target in this one, John? And I also want to ask you, am I crazy to think that the over in this game, the line is 53.5, is the betting play of the week?
For the over?
Yeah.
I mean, BYU did allow more than 10 points to USF, which is a little bit concerning. USF is plumb terrible. You can't really take anything away from Baylor's game against Albany or whatever it was. But yep. What's their mascot? They have some sort of dog.
What is it?
The Great Danes, right?
The Great Danes. That's
Oh
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
Morgan. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the
great,
Great Danes.
great mascot. Good lacrosse program, but obviously not quite on Baylor's level on the gridiron. But I digress. I like the yeah no I like the over. I wouldn't call it my play of the week, but I haven't necessarily concocted that one just yet. But yeah, this is going to be a really fun game. I love that it's like the night kick, so we get to digest all the good day's action and then get ready for this one because I have really high hopes for both of these programs. So them going up against each other, I think is going to be amazing late night
All right. Well, you
television.
didn't really sell me, but I'm still going with it anyway. I'm committed.
Okay.
I'm going with the over. They combined for over 60 points when they met last year, so I think they're going to do something similar again in this one. All right, let's get to our speed round here, John. Starting off, Hendon Hooker at Pittsburgh, 215.5 passing yards, more or less.
I'm taking the more. I think that Tennessee, they go to the air a little bit more. I'm a little bit worried about the run game here. I think that they turn it over to Hooker. I think that they just run 75, 80 plays here. Give me the more for Hooker.
On the other side, you got Keaton Slovis, First Tennessee, 270.5 passing yards, more or less.
Taking the less. Pitt can't run, but I think Slovis is a fraud waiting to happen, and I think he gets exposed fully this week against Tennessee.
Sam Hartman is back for Wake Forest. I watched that betting line in real time jump almost a touchdown. They're taking on Vandy in Vandy. 300.5 more or less for Sam Hartman.
I'm taking the more. Vandy, nice story to start the year here. Kind of got to captivate all of us with their beatdown of Hawaii. Wake's a totally different beast, and Hartman coming back. This could get ugly for Vandy, so I'm taking the more for Hartman.
All right, your Saturday night matchup on ABC is USC at Stanford. Caleb Williams, the Trojans quarterback, 225.5 passing yards, more or less.
Well, the USC isn't, a 3-touchdown favorite in this one. So I think that, Caleb Williams is going to have to play closer to the full game here against the Cardinal. I like the more on this one, even if like the passing volume isn't crazy. I think the efficiency will follow along nicely enough to where he eats the more.
All right, Sean Tucker, Syracuse's running back at UConn, 110.5 rushing yards, more or less.
More. Not even out of the question that he doubles this against UConn. UConn, I think they're a little bit spunkier than they have been in years past with Mora there, but Sean Tucker is the absolute engine of that Syracuse offense, and I think we see it again here on Saturday.
Right, Devin O'Kane, Texas A&M's running back versus Appalachian State, 80.5 rushing yards, more or less.
Really disappointing week from him last week in the openers against an FCS opponent. So that initially steered me towards the less, but I had to reevaluate where I am on A-Chain, and that guy is a beast. He runs like a 10 flat in the 100-yard dash. Chunk plays are coming. We saw it against App State with what UNC was able to do with them. So A-Chain hits the more here.
And finally, Zay Flowers at Virginia Tech, 78.5 receiving yards, more or less.
Zay Flowers is my guy. He is so fun to watch. So too bad the BC, lost last week to Rutgers, but Zay Flowers certainly wasn't the reason why. I think we're going to see him get like 15 targets this week against the Hokies, who lost to Old Dominion. Come on now, give me the more for Flowers.
Yeah, I went to that game, the BC Rutgers game, and let me just tell you, that was some of the worst football I've ever watched, but it was hysterical. Rutgers drove all the way down to the 1-yard line, John. First and goal from the 1. They punted from the 43. That's how that series went. It was just unbelievable. Watching Greg Schiano lose his mind, though, was a lot of fun there in the bleachers at Chestnut Hill. All right, John, anything else this week you want to touch on?
Let's see. I mean, I think this Tennessee Pitt game, I think, is really drawing a lot of my interest. I think that Tennessee really is one of the better teams in the East, and they get a chance to prove it against Pitt. Really excited to see what they're able to do in that one. A&M needs to be a little bit more convincing in their own right. I just was not overly impressed with them. I think as far as fun games, we get Virginia and Illinois. That could be pretty interesting. Virginia, I was worried about their offense dropping off after Bronco Mendenhall left, but it looks like they're going to at least try to follow the similar philosophy, be up tempo, hit those big chunk plays. Seeing them against a Big Ten defense, I think, is a really, really nice test. And then as far as just games that always get weird are concerned, Iowa State. Everyone loves the under. Why wouldn't you? But somehow this one like could go over for just reasons beyond our, our comprehension.
Somehow, some way. The Appalachian State A&M over under 53.5. Can App State hang in there enough to put up some points?
Well, I think a lot of last week's App State, offensive success, yes, it helped being at home, but I think UNC has one of the worst defenses in the Power Five. A&M certainly does not. I think that they might overpower App State to the point where App State stays under 20 points. It's just a matter of, can A&M's offense get on track? I'm not as sold on that one just yet. So I might either stay away or take the under.
Very good. All right, guys. Thank you very much for watching. That'll do it for us this week. We'll be back next week. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page at Monkey Knife Fight. All of our NFL shows are coming out soon as well. So make sure you check out those, and we'll talk to you later.